Lights, camera, action.
Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast.
Hello.
It is officially episode 6, and today we're going to be covering Casablanca. But before we get into that, we promised that we were going to be doing a giveaway soon, and we are officially back from our vacation, which means it's time to talk about our giveaway. Now, Em, you and I have been talking, and I think we decided that we're going to be giving away 3 prizes. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, we're going to be giving away 3 custom-made t-shirts that are like Married to Movies, merchandise, podcast, whatever you want to call it, but custom t-shirts that we had designed for our show. We're going to be giving them away for absolutely no cost to the viewer. There are going to be 3 opportunities for you guys to enter. So we have 3 social media pages. One is on YouTube, one is on Instagram, and one is on Facebook. You are going to have an opportunity to enter on each one of those platforms. Now, that being said, we are going to pick the winner at random for each entry. However, you cannot win on each different platform, meaning that if Emily were to enter on all 3 platforms, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, she cannot win if she wins on one of them. So now that we have that out of the way, time to talk about how you can enter our contest. So when this episode is live, it's going to be Saturday. What's the date going to be for this episode, Em? Saturday, June 24th, right?
Yes.
Okay, so when this episode airs, Saturday, June 24th, there is going to be a post on both our Instagram page and our Facebook page. It is going to be distinct in that it says contest entry, something to that effect. It's not going to be easily mistakable. You're going to have to go to that post, and there are going to be a few conditions in order to be considered to win the contest. So both on our Instagram page and our Facebook page, you're going to have to be a follower of that page. So on Facebook, you can like the page and you can also follow. You're going to have to be a follower to be entered into the contest. On Instagram, you can only follow. So that one's pretty easy. Now, on the contest entry page itself, you're going to have to like that post, and then you're going to have to tag one person who does not already follow our page. So if it's your grandma, your aunt, your niece, doesn't matter who it is, as long as they don't already follow our page, that will enter you into the contest. So there are 2 conditions. You have to be following the page, and then you have to tag somebody on the contest post that doesn't already follow our page. If you do those 2 things, you are automatically going to be entered into our contest.
And like the post.
Yes, thank you. And like the post. Then on YouTube, it's going to be a little bit different. So we are not going to be making a special contest video or anything like that. So it will actually be on this episode itself. So if you're listening to this on YouTube right now, episode 6, Casablanca, this is the post that you want to comment on. So if you're going to enter in on the contest for YouTube, you have to be subscribed to our channel. You have to like this post, and you have to leave a comment. You have to do all 3 things, though. If you just do 1 or 2 of them, you are disqualified. You have to do all 3. So if you're listening and you're not subscribed, but you leave a comment and you like it, you are not going to be entered into the contest. So you have to be a subscriber, you got to like the post, and you have to leave a comment on this episode that you're listening to right now. So those are the 3 ways to enter into the contest. Once we have a winner for each different page, we're going to contact you via that social media. So if you went on YouTube, we'll send you a direct message on YouTube. Same thing for Instagram or Facebook, and we will ship the shirt out to you. Now, we are going to give 1 week's time for the entry. So once, what I mean by that is once episode 7 is released, the contest will be closed. At that time, then we will determine a winner on each page. And then after we get a winner, we'll reach out to you, and then we will get the t-shirt shipped to you. Or if, you live close, we'll just hand deliver it. So anyways, we're excited about the shirts we have. There will be a preview of them on our social media pages so that you can kind of get excited for it. I think they look pretty cool, don't you?
I do.
Yeah, I really like them. All right, awesome. So good luck. Enter into the contest. And remember, if you're on Instagram or Facebook, you have to be a follower and you have to tag somebody that already does not follow our page on the contest post. And with that, I think we can jump into the movie.
Alrighty. So, Casablanca was released in, well, there's kind of a fuzzy story on the release date. I don't know if you know this already, John.
I don't. I know when the movie was shot. So let me say this before we get into the details. Casablanca is an old movie.
Yes.
We're aware.
Black and white.
Yeah, black and white. It was shot in 1942 during World War II. So we know that most people probably have not seen this movie. So if you haven't seen this movie, go watch it. You can watch it on Amazon. You can rent it for 99 cents right now, or it's streaming on HBO Max for free. But it is an excellent movie. It is a classic movie. It was one of the first movies that was selected to be preserved in the Library of Congress. And I think that it's an important movie, but it's also it is revered as one of the greatest movies of all time. So if you haven't seen it, go watch it. And then give our podcast a listen.
Yes. And I will say, if it's your first time watching, like it was mine, because I had not seen this movie before we watched it just the other day. I was a little confused at first, but it picked up pretty quick to where I was able to catch on. And also, I'm the kind of person that gets confused about things easily. So if you're watching it, you might be totally fine. But
yeah, I will agree with that. I've seen the movie twice. The first time I saw it was in my high school English class. My English teacher showed it to us. Actually, I think it was dual credit, so it was technically college, but that's neither here nor there. Anyways, he showed it to us, and I felt very much the same way for the first, I don't know, half hour, somewhere in that neighborhood. There's just kind of a lot going on. You really do have to pay attention, but then the movie really takes shape and becomes a lot easier to follow.
Yeah. And I would also recommend watching it with subtitles because one, they have accents, which I'm usually pretty good about understanding accents, but some of them talk really fast. So I just turned the subtitles on just so I could pick up on everything that was going on.
Yeah, I think it's helpful, especially like Renault, the Frenchman. He has an accent, but he talks pretty fast.
Yeah.
Kind of hard to follow sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so going back to where we were. So the movie was actually planned to be released early in the year of 1943, but they decided to kind of wrap up early and release it a little bit earlier than planned, just in the Hollywood Theater in New York. Because they wanted it to coincide with the Allied invasion of North Africa and capture of Casablanca, like the actual one. So they released it there in Hollywood, November 26, 1942, but then they wide released it at the pre-planned date, January 23rd of 1943, which that actually coincided with an event too. So for the wide release, that coincided with the Casablanca Conference, which was an important meeting between Winston Churchill and FDR in Casablanca.
Interesting.
Yes. So the director of the movie was, and I'm probably going to say his last name wrong. Do you know how to say it, John? Michael Curtis? With a Z?
I would say Curtis.
Okay. And then it is starring Humphrey Bogart, Ingrid Bergman, Paul Henreid, Claude Rains, and Dooley Wilson. It was distributed by Warner Bros. Runtime of 1 hour and 42 minutes. It was rated PG, and its budget was originally supposed to be $878,000, but it ended up increasing to $1.3039 million in order to just pay the salaries to all the cast and writers.
Now, is that the adjusted budget for inflation, or is that the original budget?
I don't know.
Okay. Because I
didn't do my research well enough.
No, I read those numbers, and I can't remember if those were the ones that were adjusted for inflation or not. I don't think it was.
I don't think it was either.
Which is shocking to think about, because $1 million back in 1942
was a lot.
That's a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I could be completely wrong though. And then the box office total, I found a very specific number. It was $10,565,232.
Wow.
So that is all I have for introductory details.
That's a pretty big gap for being back in 1942. I mean, it did well, sounds like.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, what part do you want to jump into next? I know, so normally we would do like casting details in terms of like alternate cast, but since this is a movie that was made in the 40s, we don't really have those details, and generally speaking, most of our audience would not know who somebody, like an alternate person being cast for a role was, even if we had those details. Honestly, most people probably don't even know who Humphrey Bogart is. I know I didn't, except for Casablanca. So if you want, we can do some fun facts now, or production details, or I took the liberty of making like a fan cast, so to speak, of if this movie was going to be made today, who I think could play some of the roles well.
Well, normally right now we do casting details, so let's hear your cast.
Okay, so I only picked 3 people, 3 characters from the movie, I guess, just because there are a lot of characters that I felt like played an important role, but I would say these are the most important characters in the movie. So I picked 3 potential actors for each character. So first character is the main character, Rick, played by Humphrey Bogart. The first person that I thought would be a good cast if we were making this today was George Clooney. I also thought Oscar Isaac, and this one, it might be a little bit of an odd choice, but I think it's a really good one. John Stamos.
That is a very interesting choice.
Isn't it? Okay, it is, but don't you think that he obviously has the charm? Because Rick has a lot of charm, but there are a lot of episodes in Full House where John Stamos is embittered as Jesse.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think he could play that really well. But the key here also, with all 3 of these guys, you have to have a bit of swagger, as well as just a good-looking guy. I think all 3 of these guys embody that well, as well as having the depth to play the character of Rick well.
I could envision all 3 of them, I think. Now that you backed up John Stamos, I can see it.
Who would be your number 1 pick out of those 3 that I said?
I think the one that I could like automatically, as soon as you said it, like see the most in that role would probably be George Clooney.
Yeah, I think Clooney would probably knock it out of the park. One that I also thought was Brad Pitt. I think he could do a really, really good job too. Okay, so the next character I have is Ilsa, the second most important character, or the most. So she is played by Ingrid Bergman, yeah, in the original movie. So for alternate casting, I have Emily Blunt.
Okay.
Ana de Armas, which, do you know who she is?
I don't know that I do.
You would know her if you saw her. So she was in the newest 007, No Time to Die. She was the girl that James works with in Cuba. She's also in the movie War Dogs. She was the girlfriend of Miles Teller in that movie. Yeah. She's in one of the new John Wick movies. She's getting her own spinoff. And then the last one I picked was, I know you're not going to know her because you're not going to recognize the name, but you've seen her before. Marion Cotillard. I think I'm saying that name right. So she's in a lot of movies that Christopher Nolan makes, but one of the big ones is Inception. She's the wife of Leonardo DiCaprio in that, but she died, and he's kind of chasing her ghost throughout the movie. She's also in The Dark Knight Rises. She's the daughter of Ra's al Ghul. Yes, it is pronounced Raish and not Raz. That is something that movie got wrong. That is a comic book nerd moment, but I have to say it. So anyways, those are the 3 I picked for that. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do now. Okay.
So out of those 3, who would you pick?
I think the one that I could most envision would be Anna, probably.
Really?
Yeah.
I think any three of them would knock it out of the park.
I think any of them could do it, but that's the one I could most picture.
Okay. So then the final character I picked was Renault, who is he's a slime bag, but he has redeeming qualities, and in the end, he ends up actually kind of having a change of heart and being a good guy. So I had to think about somebody who could play that well, somebody who can play a bad guy, but that I wouldn't say but that almost has redeeming qualities about him.
Can I guess whose one of yours is?
I'm certain that you're going to be able to guess one of them.
Okay. Hang on, sorry.
Okay.
Could it be Jeff Goldblum?
No.
Oh, okay.
I hate Jeff Goldblum. I would never cast him in it. No,
I just wondered because you have said before, and you might have said it in our Jurassic Park episode, that like he does a very good job of playing like that kind of character.
Yeah. No, I don't hate Jeff Goldblum, but he's not somebody that generally I would cast unless really was right for the role. And I don't see him in this role, although I think he could play it. Mm-hmm. I think he could, but I'm just not a big Jeff Goldblum fan. So the first person I picked for Renault was Tom Hiddleston.
Really?
Yes.
I could see it. I could see it.
I can see it. I mean, obviously I can see it. I picked him, but he plays Loki. Mm-hmm. Especially in the first Thor, the first Avengers, the second Thor, and the Loki series. He does a really good job of just being a jerk, but still getting the audience to like him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so the next person I picked was Javier Bardem, which you probably don't know him by name, but he plays the bad guy in Skyfall, the 007 Skyfall. Mm-hmm. He also plays the pirate in the most recent Pirates of the Caribbean movie. He plays the bad guy.
I don't know if I've seen the most recent one, have I?
Yes, you have.
Oh.
You've only seen it once, though, and it was years ago. It's kind of forgettable. He also plays the bad guy in No Country for Old Men, which I don't think you've seen, but I have, and your dad loves that movie. Mm-hmm. But anyways, so I picked Javier Bardem. He's an amazing actor. I think he's phenomenal. He would do a great job. And the last person I picked was Antonio Banderas. Do you know who he is?
Vaguely.
Okay, so he plays like the dad in the original Spy Kid movies. He also plays the bad guy in the new Uncharted movie. He was Zorro, which you've never seen the Zorro movies, have you?
No, I haven't.
Yeah. So anyways, those are the guys that I picked. I think all three of them have a great ability to play a bad guy who can also get the audience to like them. Mm-hmm. So anyways, fun little side segment that we don't really ever do. But outside of that, what do you want to jump into next?
I can do my fun facts.
Okay, cool.
Okay. So, as we've already kind of discussed, the filming of this movie as well as the release took place during World War II. So that kind of...
Which the movie's also set in World War II.
Right.
It's kind of... I'm trying to think of other movies that are set in the same way, like basically a real world event is going on and the movie comes out at the same time, and there really isn't one.
Yeah.
At least not that I can think of. So this is very interesting on that side of it.
Right. Yeah. So one thing that I thought was really interesting and ironic was that many of the actors who played the Nazis in the movie were German Jews who had escaped from Nazi Germany during that time.
Oh, wow.
So that was kind of crazy.
It makes a lot of sense, though, when you think about it, because the movie was shot during World War II, there's probably not going to be a lot of German people, at least native German people, who are willingly signing up to play bad guys in a movie.
Yeah.
Maybe German immigrants, but yeah, that makes perfect sense for German Jews who were kicked out of the country or fled the country.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh.
So next one is that Rick's Cafe in the movie, which is basically, for those of you who don't know, where most of the movie takes place. It's like the saloon that Rick owns. But the cafe itself was one of the only sets that was built specifically for this movie. So all of the other sets, or most of the other sets, were reused from previous films because there were so many restrictions on building supplies and that kind of thing because of the war.
Mhm. I actually did learn that. I didn't see that it was because of the war, but that makes perfect sense. You know, they have all kinds of embargoes going during that. But yeah, pretty much every set was like repurposed from another movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't go so far as to see what other movies they borrowed them from, but that'd be interesting to look up.
I did, but again, I don't think any of our listeners care because they won't know them. So that's why I didn't include it. But.
Okay. Next one. Casablanca was actually originally supposed to be a play called Everybody Comes to Rick's, but it was never produced. So the Warner Bros. Bought the rights for $20,000, which would be equivalent to over $370,000 today.
You stole my production details.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, you're fine.
Second thing, the script was written as they filmed. So they kept having to change things because of the Hays Code, which I didn't know what the Hays Code was before this, but it was basically like just some rules that films had to abide by, like guidelines. And it basically...
Well, the Hays Code is similar. I think it has a different name today, but it's essentially like the rating code for movies. Like it's the what they allow to be in film and what can't be.
Yeah. So a couple examples of what they couldn't include was like profanity or like graphic violence, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And more than that. But yeah, the Hays Code was only in place between 1934 and 1968. So it's very well possible that it's something else now.
Yeah, it has a different name today. The original Hays Code was dissolved and there's a new name, but I don't remember what it is, but it's a lot less restrictive in the sense that like they allow a lot more stuff to be shown on film, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
So, anyways.
Yeah. So they had to keep kind of changing things as they were going and filming because of the Hays Code and just things that were allowed to be on film. But this film was actually supposed to originally end with Rick and Ilsa going to America, but the code wouldn't allow depictions of getting away with that stuff. So because
she was married to another man.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, I probably should have included that.
They didn't want to depict a woman leaving her marriage.
Right.
Essentially.
Right. So, John and I were actually talking about this yesterday, maybe, just about what we thought about the movie. Because like we said, this was the first time I had seen it. So John was just asking my thoughts, what characters I liked and that kind of thing. And I would have to say that my favorite character in the movie is Rick. But if they would have gone that direction, he probably would have been my least favorite character if he would have allowed Ilsa to just get up and leave her husband behind and things.
Yeah.
So I am thankful that they went in the direction they did.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. I think the movie, which we can talk about this in a minute, but I think it has a lot, I don't know, maybe a lot bigger call to action, or it hits home a lot better because of the sacrifice and the character choices and what we saw on screen.
Right.
Yeah.
A couple more. One, Humphrey Bogart, the actor who played Rick, was actually decently shorter than Ingrid Bergman, who played Ilsa. So he had to wear platform shoes in scenes with her, which I believe he was only like 1 inch shorter, but they still didn't want to depict that.
Yes, you're stealing more of my details.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine. So Rick. Humphrey was 2 inches shorter than Ilsa or Ingrid, whatever, same thing. But they wanted to have him as being taller. The main reason being for that is that, I mean, one, kind of a different time, they wanted to depict the man as being bigger, but also two, they wanted to show him as being a character that kind of demanded respect, so to speak. Like he had a presence in a room. Mm-hmm. You see that a lot with just how he handles conversation with people, saying like, I don't stick my neck out for anybody, stuff like that. Just like a guy who everybody kind of fears, kind of respects, kind of loves, but he had to have a presence in a room. So that was part of that.
Mm-hmm. So I was curious. So I don't know who's right because my facts showed me that he was only 1 inch shorter than her. But
Well,
I looked up like their heights just because I was curious, and it said that Humphrey was 5'8" and Ingrid was 5'9".
okay. I don't know. Mine said 5 centimeters, that he was 5 centimeters shorter, which equates to 2 inches.
Gotcha.
But it doesn't matter. Who
Yeah.
cares? Which, funny thing, that actually lines up a lot with at least one current actor that I can think of. Do you know who that is?
Tom Cruise?
Yes. Yes, Tom Cruise is, I think he's like 5'7".
I believe so.
He's like in that neighborhood, 5'7", 5'8", 5'6", somewhere in there. But he has to be taller than basically everybody on screen. So they'll have like a platform for him to stand on, or boxes, whatever. But interesting.
Yeah. And then my last fact. Okay, sorry. My last fact is that the war, since the filming was going on during World War II, it prevented them from filming at the airport after dark just due to security concerns. So in the very ending of the movie, there's a scene at the airport when they're fleeing to America, and because of the restrictions on filming after dark at an airport, they actually shot all of that on a soundstage that they just had set up to look like a runway. But the plane was just like a giant cardboard cutout, which I thought was kind of funny.
Getting more of my production details.
Okay, sorry. That was all that I had though, so I won't steal anymore.
You're fine. Okay, so my turn to cover production.
It is.
Okay, so you already said this, but Casablanca was originally written as a stage play. It was called Everybody Comes to Rick's, but the play was never produced. So in January 1942, Warner Brothers acquired the film rights for the play. They quickly hired writers to adjust the stage play script to be turned into a screenplay, a movie script. Shortly after, principal photography began on May 25th, 1942, and it ended on August 3rd, 1942. Now, you kind of mentioned this earlier, but Casablanca was shot entirely on a soundstage, which I find pretty impressive just because it's black and white, so I guess it's hard to make out some of the details, but they were not on location for anything. Mm-hmm. And I guess when you think about it, the majority of the time is spent inside buildings, so you don't notice it, but there are some outdoor, like they're at the market or whatever, scenes like that. And I never got the feeling for a moment that they were on a soundstage. So they did a really good job on that. But the only exception to that being that they did have stock footage clips of Paris, like the Eiffel Tower and everything, for some of the flashback sequences, as well as the shots of the airplane. So you already hit on this a little bit, but the airplane was a small scale cardboard plane. However, it was fairly close to full size, but it was small enough that, like, when you're looking at the plane on the runway and you see people in the background and whatnot, it's kind of like silhouettes. Those are little people, like dwarfs. They use them as extras just to kind of appropriately scale for the model of the plane.
Really?
Yes.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So I thought that was very interesting. But anyways, the movie was shot in sequence, which is also highly unusual. So what I mean by that is that as it plays out in the script, scene by scene, that's how the movie was shot, which is very surprising because most films, they shoot scenes based on, if it requires a specific location, but it's at two different points in the movie, or like a lot of the time, an actor might grow their hair out for one scene in the movie, but the rest of the movie, they have the hair cut. So just things like that, or like perfect example, in the newest Mission Impossible movie, which hasn't come out yet, but it's coming out soon, Tom Cruise does a stunt where he like basically drives a dirt bike off of a mountain and then parachutes like off of it. So it's a really incredible stunt. You can watch it on YouTube, even though the movie's not out yet. They've published that, but it was in Tom's contract. He said, I want that to be shot first, even though it's supposed to be like a big climax in the movie. Because he said, if I die doing it, I want it to be captured on film. So just a more recent example of that. But anyways, Casablanca was shot in sequence. So cool little, interesting, unusual fact there. And You already touched on the fact that Humphrey is shorter than Ingrid, and we already did the fan cast. So that's all I have for production details. They were pretty scarce, just again because this movie was shot in 1942, released in 43. We really don't have a lot of details to go off of as far as those things go.
One thing that I did just think of, like as you were talking about how they kind of shot in order, which is unusual. I read up just some regular, like just random facts about the movie, and the song that they, that is like
Yes.
Ilsa
as
and
time goes by, I think is the name of it.
Yeah. So like it's Ilsa and Rick's song, like they like what's his name? Sam plays it on the piano.
Great. A great song. I love that.
Yeah. So actually, I don't know if it was the director or some other higher up in the film, but somebody did not like that song.
Yes, so I know exactly what you're talking about. It was I forget his name, but he wrote the score for the movie. So he did all the music. So naturally you would think, well, if he wrote the score, then he would have written the song too, but that's not the case. So if you recall, the movie was originally a stage play. Mm-hmm. As opposed to a screenplay. And so when the script was written for the stage play, this song was written for that stage play. And because in the original script, it was meant to be like a kind of central theme of the movie, or at least for the two main characters, it was kind of a thing that tied them together. When the screenplay was written, they kept it in there. So the man who wrote the score, and I can't think of his name, he did not do any of the music for that song specifically, and he hated it, and he wanted to rewrite the song or, do something completely different. However, they had already shot the scenes that included Ingrid and Humphrey and I'll just call them Ilsa, Rick, and Sam. It had those three characters in those scenes. And after the fact, Ilsa, or Ingrid in real life, she cut her hair short. And they didn't want to put a wig on because they didn't think it could look right. So they decided to just keep the song in there because they couldn't reshoot. So they never rewrote it.
Yes. Well, I stole your production details. You stole my story.
Oh, well, I guess we're even now.
Yeah. All right. So, John, I've been trying to think of this for a while now, and I still can't decide. So what score would you give the movie? 1 to 100.
I would say probably a 90. I don't know. I want to say 93, but I think I'm going to say 94.
Okay. Wow. That's impressive.
Yeah. What would you give it?
Probably a 2. I'm just kidding.
I was gonna say, be quiet.
No, I was gonna score lower than that, but I still don't know for sure. I want to say like a 89 or a 90.
Really?
Simply because it was really hard for me to follow in the beginning. I wish that there was some more cohesiveness and that it wasn't so difficult for me to like figure out what was going on. And like I couldn't even track without like having to pause the movie and ask you like, okay, what just happened? You know?
So I think that's fair. That's a fair criticism. I will say though, at least for me, that's one of the redeeming things I find about the movie, or one of the things that I like about it, is the fact that it's not holding my hand. It's not over explaining things. It just gets you to watch. And at least for me, the first time I watched it, I remember being in your shoes and being confused. But I said, but this is really interesting. This is good. So I felt like the confusion helped get me plugged in, and to the point where I was really paying attention. And I mean, maybe that's why I like the movie so much. But I felt like it did a really, really good job of showing, not telling me, that Rick is an important person. Because the first, I don't know, what would you say, 20 minutes? 20 minutes or more is basically just a day in Rick's life, so to speak. It's just every night basically what would be going on in his club. And I appreciate that, but I get where you're coming from.
Yeah, I guess our minds just work differently because the confusion drew you in, but it kind of took me out of it.
Well, and to be fair, At that point, we didn't have the subtitles on for you either.
That's true. Yeah.
So it may have been a different story if from the beginning we had the subtitles on.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So maybe I'll bump it up to a 91 just because of that reason that I just couldn't understand what they were saying.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
So,
Yeah, I really like this movie. There are a lot of things that I like about it, but at least for me, I feel one that it has a really important message, a really important through line from start to finish. If you watch the whole movie, you think about the whole character arc of each person, but especially Rick, like really specifically Rick. A really great story arc there, as well as it's an emotional movie. It tugs at your heartstrings, and it's one of those ones where it's like you can't really be mad at one person directly for any of their actions.
right.
At least not the important characters. Like you can be mad at Renault for the implied things he was doing to get people their visas, or what. Like there's a lot of implied things that are really bad that characters did, which is also in part because of the rating system at that time. The Hays Code, was that the name of it?
Yes.
There was a lot of stuff that had to be implied because if they explicitly said this or that, they would not permit it to be in the movie, which is interesting when you think about film today. It's very much the opposite. But anyways, we're not talking about that. I think that I appreciate that there are things that are subtle as far as the things that characters are doing that are like overtly evil or wrong aren't so in your face that it's egregious. So I can appreciate that. And I also really like that the movie gets you invested into this love story or love triangle, that it's nobody's fault. Nobody did anything wrong, so to speak, in terms of, we can just talk about it. We're at the point where we're talking about the film. So you have your main character of Ilsa, who was in love with Rick in Paris. We find out later in the film. And, it was kind of one of those things where it's like, no questions asked. Like, we're madly in love. We're going to keep it that way. And come to find out later in the movie that she was married. Well, she thought her husband was dead, but it turns out that he wasn't. So she was only with Rick because she thought that her husband was dead.
Mm-hmm.
But then her and Rick are going to escape Paris because the Nazis are invading. And come to find out, they had a plan to go over to Morocco, over to Casablanca, to then get to America. And then she basically stands Rick up. He gets left at the train station. She never shows. And then Rick and Sam get on the train and leave. Well, she found out the day before they were supposed to go that her husband was actually alive.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's like, okay, well, I have to go back to him. And it gets really complex. And, Rick is obviously really hurt and upset. And then later in the movie, she shows up back into his life. And you've got this really like complex story, but there's nobody that you can just stand at the TV and say, you're an idiot, what's wrong with you, or anything like that.
Right.
So I think that's really cool. So I have more to say, but I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts?
Just about what you said, or just about the movie in general?
Anything, movie in general.
Yeah, I appreciated that it wasn't necessarily in like this straight cohesive order, because when we're first introduced to Ilsa, and then also, I'm blanking on his name.
Laszlo?
Yes.
Her husband?
Laszlo.
Victor Laszlo?
Like, again, that was one instance where I was like, okay, who are these people? Which I think that was intentional. Like, you're supposed to be like, okay, who
Yes.
are they? Why are they important? You know? And then you kind of, as the story goes on, like, you are introduced, like, you can tell that, like, okay, Rick and Ilsa already know each other. How do they know each other? And,
Right.
So it's getting you to kind of ask questions. It starts getting your gears spinning and that kind of thing. So I really appreciated that it wasn't just like, all laid out for you, I guess. And Yeah, so that was really cool.
Yeah. And I think probably my favorite part about the movie is that as the story goes on, Rick is really embittered. He's so mad at Ilsa for what she did to him. They were madly in love and she stood him up, and now he's basically just a drifter.
Right.
So where they're at in Casablanca, he's basically just remaining neutral on everything because we're in the middle of World War II. So he just keeps saying, I don't care who you are. I don't stick my neck out for anybody. Things of that nature, where you can tell that he really doesn't care about anybody except for himself or his employees. Outside of that, he doesn't care what the Germans are doing. He doesn't care about America. He doesn't care about the French. Does not matter to him. He's just worried about his life.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it really interesting that as the movie goes on and Ilsa gets basically thrown into his life, she upturns everything. You see him drinking by himself after the cafe is closed. Sam comes out, brings the piano, and just says, like, I'm not going home, boss. I'm staying here with you. Which, side note, Sam is like one of the best characters in this movie.
I agree.
Honestly, I would say that this movie has some of the best secondary characters. I don't know what you call him. You got Sam, who's the pianist, who is just he has a phenomenal voice. Which, by the way, fun fact: did you know? I think is it Dooley Wilson that plays Sam?
Yes.
He cannot play the piano.
I kind of wondered while I was watching, and just like some of the ways that his hands were moving, because I used to play piano and I've never seen anybody play piano in some of those ways.
I think it said he can play the drums, but not the piano.
Okay.
So, he faked it and they played music over it and whatnot, but he has a killer voice. He can sing really, really well.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's always fun to watch a performer who performs well, but outside of that, he's a truest of true friends to Rick. And I love that. There's really not, a lot that's contingent on the friendship, at least for Sam. He's just loyal, which is awesome. And then I love Carl. He's the large German waiter who works for Rick. He's so funny. I really like him. And
he's actually one of the German Jews that escaped.
In real life?
Yep.
Oh, I didn't know that. Really?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense. Because he speaks German in the movie. He does really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, okay, cool. Well, yeah, I love Carl. He's really funny. Plays a small role, but just, again, a very likable background character. I love that. Even the waiter, Sasha, who has very little screen time, he's at least funny, but not like, I feel like today everybody's like overly funny. Like they try hard.
Mm-hmm.
And this was not that. It was just a very natural, like comedic presence, I guess.
Right.
So anyways, but that's a total side note. So you have Rick who's embittered and he's drinking by himself. Sam is staying with him. His life basically gets turned upside down. And Rick has these letters of transport that can get anybody to any country without any questions. So you have to remember during World War II, travel was a really big deal. You had to have travel visas because different countries were waging war. You had neutral states, you had allied states, you had Axis states. It was all really complicated. But Casablanca was French occupied, but it was fairly neutral during the war. It was kind of Vichy, which is like French, German, but anyways, they were largely neutral. At least that's how they're depicted in the movie. And so Rick had these letters that could get anybody out of the country because the Germans, the French were checking to see who was traveling. They were denying people entry. But this was a big deal for the people who were trying to get over to America. So he has these travel visas, and Victor Laszlo and his wife Ilsa show up, who Ilsa is Rick's former lover. They need these. And as the movie goes on, they're trying to get them, and Rick is like 100% opposed. He will not give it to them. But, Ilsa basically sticks her neck out for Laszlo. She even goes as far as pulling a gun on Rick and saying, like, look, I tried to reason with you, but my husband and I are getting out of here. Give them to me. And then she basically confesses her love to Rick and says, look, I left you once. I am still in love with you. I can't do this again. This is so complicated. I hate that everything happened the way that it did, because it was genuine. She thought her husband was dead, but then he turned out not to be. And they even say in the movie that he was reported dead like 5 times because he just kept escaping the Nazis. So anyways, you have this character arc of Rick who goes from being an embittered guy to then finally breaking through with Ilsa. They basically bury the hatchet and they make things good again. And he's at the very least being tender towards her, because for a lot of the movie, he was borderline mean to her. Definitely rude and closed off. And then he basically hatches this plan where he says, hey, actually, key detail. Ilsa says, I can't leave you again. You're going to have to do the thinking for both of us because I can't do it. And so he's like, okay, I'll do it. So he hatches this plan, tells Ilsa that she needs to tell her husband, Victor, that he's going to give them both the travel visas. They're going to go to the airport and put Victor on the plane, but Ilsa is going to stay back in Casablanca with Rick and they're going to live together. So that's what Ilsa thinks is going on. But then the audience sees Rick go to Renault's office, and Renault, we haven't really talked about his character, but he's, like we said, he's a slime ball. He's not giving people travel visas unless he gets something in return. And he's like kind of buddy with the Nazis, kind of not. He's like kind of a likable guy because of his friendship with Rick, but then he does these things that are just bad. So Rick goes to Renault's office and tells him, hey, I got a proposition for you. I do have the travel visas, but I want to get Ilsa back to America with me. And so here's what we're going to do. You're going to show up at my place. I'm going to tell Victor and Ilsa that they can have him, but then you're going to arrest Victor, and then Ilsa and I are going to fly off to America. And he's like, okay, blah, 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 whatever. So then the audience is not sure. They're like, are you kidding me? And I think you even told me that you were mad at Rick because you thought it was legit.
Right. Yeah. I was not happy when he said that. Yeah.
And so then, and I will say, like, watching it the first time, it is believable that he's backstabbing Laszlo in that moment. So then things start actually playing out, and Renault is at Rick's place. He's starting to arrest Laszlo, and then Rick pulls a gun on Renault. He says, not so fast, we're going to the airport. You're going to take us there. And so then the audience is kind of in on it and realizes that the plan that Rick hatched, at the very least to Renault, was phony. But something's up, because why would he hatch this plan and not keep Ilsa in on it? So then they get to the airport, they're there, and they're, Ilsa's like, what's going on? Victor still thinks it's us he thinks that us, as in the married couple, Ilsa and Victor, are going to America. And Rick tells her, like, you guys are going and I'm staying back. She's like, no, you can't do that. And he's like, look, you told us to do the thinking for the both of us, and I did. And so then you see this character arc of, like, instead of being somebody who's totally dejected and not interacting and basically not participating in anything, he's just neutral. He's taking care of himself and his employees, and that's it. To somebody who was willing to go as far as pulling a gun on the chief of police and take a wanted, he wasn't really a prisoner, but he was wanted by the Nazis, to deliver him to basically safety. He aided and abetted a wanted criminal, essentially, right, as far as the Nazis are concerned. And so he goes all the way to going that far, to then even taking it a step further and saying, no, this isn't about me. Like, I have the ability to basically retain Ilsa as my lover because she has declared her love for me, but I'm not going to. You need to go with your husband. And he even talks to Laszlo about it. He says, hey, I want you to know that she thought she was still in love with me, and I let her think that, but she's not. I'm sending you off. And there's this really great line at the end of the movie, which I'll say, I think Laszlo kind of at parts of the movie comes off as flat, maybe. like a little two-dimensional. I don't think he's a standout character in the movie, really.
Mhm.
But this line sticks out. It's so subtle, but I love this line. After Rick says that, Laszlo shakes his hand and he says, "Welcome back to the fight," which I think it just really kind of captures the whole story arc of Rick in just a few words, which is basically like, hey, he used to be fighting the good fight for the underdogs, and they hinted that multiple times in the movie that he actually used to fight the Nazis. Well, because his heart was so broken, he just basically was only looking out for himself. And now he basically went on this hero's journey to say, life isn't about me, even though I have this opportunity to get something that I really want out of it. I'm not going to, because it's about others. It's about the people that are going to be helped by my choice. And I just think that's really cool. I love that story. I love the message that it sends. I love the selflessness, the humility. And I also love, even after that, Renault has a change of character based on Rick's actions. He denounces the Nazis and allows Rick to shoot a high-ranking German officer, doesn't arrest him, and basically tells the police, because Renault is the chief of police, he tells all his officers, like, hey, you need to go look for suspects, even though he knows he just witnessed Rick shoot him. Mm-hmm. And then you have the great line, which is like now an iconic line. It's said in lots of movies and TV shows now, but Rick basically looks at Renault and says, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. Fun fact, the movie was not supposed to end there. Did you know that originally there was going to be an additional scene where Rick and Renault were freedom fighters during the invasion of North Africa?
I did not know that.
That happened in real life, the invasion of North Africa. The Allies won it, and they were going to include it in the movie. But I don't remember what their reasoning was for not keeping it, and they never ended up doing it.
Had they already filmed it, do you know?
I don't remember. I can't remember. I know I read about it, and I didn't write it down. But anyways.
Yeah, not important, just curious.
Yeah. So I kind of went on a long tangent there to explain Rick's story arc. Is there anything else that you want to talk about that you liked about this movie?
You kind of covered it all, but I was just going to mention, and I'm not going to rehash everything since you kind of summarized it well, but I just really appreciate everything they did with the ending between Rick and Laszlo, and between Rick and Ilsa, and between Rick and Renault. Like, I just loved all the exchanges and how all of that was handled by Rick. And then obviously credit goes to the writers of the movie. But I think that it was just really well, just like tied the bow on the whole thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's one of those movies that it doesn't have a happy ending, so to speak, because it's not like all sunshine and rainbows by any stretch of the imagination.
But it leaves the viewer satisfied.
Oh yeah, it delivers on every story beat that you want it to in a really satisfying way, and I can't imagine that movie ending any other way. I mean, it's a perfect ending for that movie. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, all right, cool. Well, anything else you want to touch on?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, that is Casablanca. We are officially wrapped up with episode 6. Now, remember, we talked about everything for the contest entry and how to enter it. So if you want to cover that stuff again, just rewind our video to the beginning of the movie or podcast, sorry. And you can rehash all that. But essentially, you got to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube and go from there. So we will announce the winners in next week's episode, episode 7. And next week, we're going to be covering a classic blockbuster movie, which you have not seen, Ridley Scott's Gladiator.
Yes.
Gonna be a really good one. Super excited for that. So stay tuned for that. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. And remember to enter in our contest. And other than that, give us a like, give us a follow. Let us know if you like what you're hearing. And thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Here's looking at you, kid.
Oh, good one. All right. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.